All right, this is some two-voice practice. It is not counted. We're going to estimate about under 20 words a minute. This is our murder trial. Beginning with a question for the record. So it went through those vital organs?
Went through both lungs and the heart.
Okay. And when that bullet was recovered, what did you end up doing with it?
I gave it to Mr. McGinnis.
Okay. And Mr. Reyes was there as well?
Yes.
All right. Moving on to your next one, number 3. Can you tell us where injury number 3 was?
Okay. Number 3 was in the left side of the back as indicated on the diagram.
So he was shot in the back?
Yes. The entrance wound is in the back. Yeah.
Peoples 4, can you tell us what you recognize what is shown in this photograph?
It's a photograph of the back taken during the autopsy and specifically shows that entrance wound I just described.
Right here?
That's correct.
By the way, whose hand is in the photograph?
I'm not sure. Probably is Mr. McGinnis. Might be my hand, although it...
What is the purpose of the card that's in the photograph?
It's to identify the photograph and also to put a scale in, a ruler to measure the...
Measure what?
To measure what is in the photograph. In this case, the gunshot wound.
Okay. So this injury, which you've labeled number 3, that went in the back, was there any recovery of that? Any bullet associated with number 3?
Not by me. Basically, I followed the path of the bullet and it ended over on the right side where there was incisions from the hospital.
Okay. We heard, pardon me for the interruption, we heard some evidence that actually there were bullets taken from Mr. Silman's body at the hospital. Did you see evidence of that when you did the autopsy?
Yes, as I say, I saw a bullet track that ended in a surgical incision at that point.
People's 3 that I showed you earlier, does that show anything associated with the recovery of the bullet from injury number 3?
Yes. The larger incision down by the bottom of the rib cage would be where that bullet was recovered.
Okay. So this bullet that went in the back, what did it go through? What was its path?
It went through the musculature of the back, went across the vertebra column, severed the spinal cord. It went through the inferior vena cava, which is a large vein that carries blood from the bottom part of the body back to the heart. Went through the right lobe of the liver and then exited through the body wall through the abdominal wall.
Did it go through the spinal cord?
Yes.
So if I'm counting right, went through 3 vital organs, the heart, the liver, and the spinal cord?
No, the spinal cord inferior vena cava, and the liver.
Excuse me. Okay. Went through the large vein that carries blood to the heart, perforated the liver, and it struck the spinal cord.
That's correct.
Did it sever the spinal cord?
Yes.
When a spinal cord is severed, what happens to your ability to walk or stand or run or do anything?
Basically, you're immediately paralyzed below that level, below the level of the transection. So your ability to walk or run or stand is gone. You collapse.
So that was number 3, which you labeled number 3 on Exhibit 112. Was there a 4th gunshot wound that you saw?
Yes, there was.
Where is that on your Exhibit 112?
Again, the entrance wound is on the left buttock, indicated by N4.
Showing you People's Exhibit 5. Recognize what is shown in this photograph?
Yes, this is a photograph of Mr. Silman's buttock taken during the autopsy.
Does it show that entrance wound that you have labeled N4? And if so, could you point to it?
Yes, it does.
With the laser?
I believe it's over here, sort of in the center of the left buttock.
Could you circle it? Could you show us one more time?
Yes.
Has it been circled now?
Yes.
In the photograph that has been marked People's 5. Okay. And that bullet that entered through that left buttock, what path did it take?
It went through the soft tissue at the base of the pelvis, base of the pelvic cavity, without actually striking any bone or any major vessels or other structures.
Was it recovered?
It was not. It exited from the body.
And where did you draw in where it exited on this Exhibit 112?
Yes. It's on the right side, sort of at the junction of the leg and abdomen.
X4?
X4.
Entrance 4, exit 4?
Correct.
Yes. It went clear through the body.
Yes.
If I'm following.
Yes.
Okay. And number 5?
Number 5 was in the right arm. The entrance wound was on the front of the arm, the palm side of the arm, and the exit wound was on the back of the arm.
Did you draw in the exit wound?
Yes, I did. It's on the back of the right arm.
Okay. So we have entrance 5, exit 5, correct?
Correct.
Now, we heard a witness say that he saw the person, a person actually, D, hold his arm. My question is, would there be any pain associated with this type of injury?
Yes, there would.
Showing you People 6. Do you recognize what is shown in this photograph?
Yes, this is a photograph of, again, the front of the forearm, and it shows that entrance wound.
The entrance or the exit? I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Sorry, it's the entrance wound.
Okay. We can see for reference the armpit right here, right?
Correct.
Am I correct there?
Yeah.
Okay. So this particular photograph number 6 shows the entrance wound that you labeled number 5, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So that bullet went straight through, did it?
Yes, it did.
And exited at number 5.
Correct.
And what about injury number 6?
6 was on the right foot. Again, it was a perforating wound that went in and out. The entrance was on the front of the ankle. The exit was on the top of the foot.
People 7, does that show what you're describing? Is that of Demetrius Selman?
It shows the entrance wound here on the right ankle. And it also shows the exit wound here more toward the side of his foot.
If you can answer this question, I don't know if it takes a podiatrist or general knowledge, but if you get shot like that, would you be able to walk or run or use your feet?
This did not break any bones. I didn't specifically look. It may have cut some of the tendons that would lift the foot up. So you might have difficulty walking. I don't think it would be impossible.
Okay, we're back on the record. Was a bullet recovered in association with this injury number 6?
No, it exited.
All right. Now it's a total of how many gunshot wounds did you see then to the body of Demetrius Selman?
Total of 6.
And you've numbered them on People's 112, 1 through 6?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, what is this? If I'm looking at it correctly, is this a number here?
It is. At the time I did the autopsy, I gave it was just an incision, and I wasn't sure what the significance of it was. So I gave it number 7. Turns out it was an incision made in the hospital where they recovered a missile.
Was that the one shown in People's 3?
It's the lower one, yes.
Okay. So we don't count that as a bullet wound, correct?
Correct. The wound is from the hospital.
May we have the lights on, please? So what is your opinion regarding the cause of death to Demetrius Selman based upon your conducting the autopsy upon him?
The cause of death was multiple gunshot wounds.
What was the mechanism of death?
Probably blood loss, particularly from wounds 2 and 3, and also the transection of the spinal cord.
So the most serious ones would be 2 and 3?
Yes.
Those would be what? fatal shots.
Those would be fatal by themselves. The other wounds obviously contributed to the blood loss, but were not by themselves fatal.
In other words, if someone got shot in the foot, where you have number 6, and got to the hospital right away, they would most likely live unless they lost a lot of blood.
That's correct.
And likewise, the one to the arm, number 5, by itself, that wouldn't be fatal.
That's correct.
But together with the others contributed to blood loss in this case.
Yes.
Okay. So if I'm following you, there were 2 that were in and of themselves fatal. Number 2 and number 3?
That's correct.
Okay. Were you able to tell how close to Mr. Demetrius Silman the gun or guns were that caused these injuries to him?
Not specifically. What we would look at would be deposition of gunpowder residue on the skin. What I'm trying to remember, I don't believe there was any clothing on.
Well, can you give us a range? In other words, were they, for example, were they contact wounds where a person puts the gun up to them and shoots them?
No, there was no evidence they were contact wounds.
Were they, 5 feet away?
Could have been 5 feet away.
Could they have been 20 feet away?
Could have been 20 feet away.
So no way to narrow it down. Say this one was 7 feet, this one 18, nothing like that.
No. Once it gets out beyond a foot or 2, you can't tell how far away the gun was.
Can you say what position the victim was in? Demetrius Silman was in at the time he got the shots?
No, I can't.
Well, the one in the back, is it fair to say that his back was to the gun?
His back was toward the gun, yeah. But
Other than that,
he could have been lying on the ground for all I know.
for all you know, he's on the ground and got shot on the ground?
Yes,
Or standing, running, whatever?
that's correct.
Can't really tell. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you give the bullets that were recovered to McGinnis or Reyes?
Yes, I believe to McGinnis.
Okay. By the way, did you see any evidence of injuries consistent with someone collapsing, maybe as they're falling to the ground after getting shot?
Yes, he had some small scrapes on his kneecaps, which would be...
Pardon me for interrupting you. Did you finish?
Which would be consistent with falling to the ground.
Those you didn't draw in, right?
I didn't put those on this diagram, no.
They would be where if you could draw them in with the laser.
Again, right over the kneecaps on both sides.
Okay. Consistent with like abrasions?
Yes.
Okay. Moving on to the second autopsy that you performed upon James Dudier, or the second one I'm going to discuss. Did you also draw a diagram of his injuries?
Yes, I did.
Do you have that diagram with you?
Yes, well, yeah.
Remember which autopsy was done first, by the way?
I believe Mr. Stillman was. I'm trying to find the times. He was started about 12:15.
Because we're running out of time, I'll withdraw the question. It's not important for me to ask you that right now.
Okay.
Let me show you photograph number 10, and I think we'll need the lights off for this, Mr. Kamagaki, I'm sure. Do you recognize this photograph?
Yes, this appears to be a photograph of Mr. Dudier.
I'm sorry?
Is it Dudier?
Dudier.
Dudier.
Whatever. D-U-Y-T-E.
Correct.
All right. Now on this photograph I've had marked as Peoples 113, this sketch. Did you prepare this sketch of the injuries that Mr. James Dudier received?
Yes, I did.
And did you do an internal and external examination of him?
Yes, I did.
What was his height and weight?
He was 70 inches tall, or 5 feet 10 inches tall, and weighed 191 pounds.
190 and what? 5 what?
5'10".
Okay. And what injuries did you notice to him when you did your examination?
He had a single gunshot wound. It was over the outside of the left shoulder, indicated by N1 on the diagram.
And let me show you a photograph that has been marked as Peoples 11. Does that appear to be of that injury to him?
Yes.
With the laser, show us.
Again, here on the outside of the left upper arm.
And what path did that bullet take as it entered that arm?
It went through the arm. It fractured the humerus, which is the upper arm bone. It continued into the chest, went through the space between the 6th and 7th ribs, through the upper lobe of the left lung, through the aorta, which is the large vessel that carries blood from the heart to the rest of the body. And then the aorta sits right against the vertebral column. So it struck the vertebrae and stopped, and then actually fell down or was carried with the blood flow down lower into the aorta, where I recovered it.
Okay. Now, Mr. Dudier, just a moment. Photograph 12. Does this show? You said the bullet entered. People's 11 shows where the bullet entered.
It entered there.
And does People's 12 show where it went once it entered?
Yes. After it went through the arm, it actually exited from the arm and re-entered the chest.
Where?
So there's an exit wound here and a re-entry wound here.
Oh, I see. Then once it re-entered, then it goes through the left lung and goes down goes where?
Went into the aorta and then was carried with the blood flow down to the lower in aorta.
And was that bullet recovered?
Yes, it was.
Where was it recovered?
It was in the abdominal aorta.
Show us using 113 approximately where that is, where it was recovered. Give us an idea.
Yeah, it was about the level of the navel, just a little bit to the left of the midline. And the place where it went in was up in the chest.
So what did you say? That bullet was given to whom?
Mr. McGinnis.
And did you see any other injuries on Mr. Dudier other than this gunshot injury labeled N1?
There were some superficial injuries, blunt injuries, scrapes, and very superficial cut on the forehead.
This will be some timed warm up. This is going to be at 120 words per minute. Beginning with a question for the record. Mr. Reed asked you some questions about the history of being bedridden fever and headaches for a week. I assume, first of all, you got that history from the parents, right?
Right.
You didn't review any records and glean that from the records?
I'm not sure the records were available, but I did speak to the parents.
So your assumptions as to the history from the parents, you just give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that that is a correct history?
Yes, when the patient wasn't able to tell me, yes, I relied on the family.
All right. Have you at any time before your deposition today been able to review the records of North Regional Medical Center?
I don't recall ever seeing records from North.
All right. Have you had a chance to meet with anyone in preparation for the depo other than your counsel?
I have not met with anyone.
What is your understanding of what the allegations in the lawsuit are?
I don't really know what the allegations in the lawsuit are.
Okay, that's fine. And you're not going to comment, just to kind of take it one step further from Mr. Reed's questions. You're not going to be offering any testimony concerning the standard of care of the physicians at North Regional Medical Center, where they evaluated and treated Joe Johnson on July 23rd.
I have no idea what they did.
All right. You told us when we started out that you had been called in on the case by the pediatric intensivists. Would that be Dr. Lowe? Was he one of those physicians?
His name is one that is one. I don't know exactly which one called me. The only reason I associate him with it is because his name is the one that is on the patient's sticker.
All right. Well, it looks like he was the one physician that was personally involved, at least in the beginning, but you don't have a recollection.
I don't recall specifically.
And just to clarify, I'm not sure that we did establish this. Your consult note, which I think was marked as an exhibit, that said 724 on it. That is not correct, we know.
Yes.
Now, is it more likely, based on the other information in the chart, that it was actually 726? That was the first day you saw him?
725.
Joe came in through the emergency department in the evening of July 25th, so you would have seen him that evening.
Right.
Did you look at the CT film yourself, or did you just review the report?
That I don't recall specifically. I believe I looked at the film, but I don't recall that specifically.
Are you familiar with the disease process or the entity of cerebritis? Is that something that you're familiar with in your practice?
It's not something that I would be asked to look at.
You know what it is, though.
It's a brain swelling, I assume, just from I'm not familiar with the clinical entity of cerebritis.
All right. If you were to see it on film, would you recognize it?
No.
Do you know whether Joe Johnson had evidence on CT of cerebritis on July 25th?
It's not something that I would recognize on the films.
And aside from whether you could independently appreciate it yourself, do you recall being aware one way or the other that he had cerebritis?
You're not referring to a brain abscess, which...
No, I'm talking about inflammation of the cortex is what I understand it is.
I don't know.
All right. You told us in response to Mr. Reed's questions that when you first saw Joe on July 25th, that he had no history of sinus disease, and I wanted to ask you what that means.
The family told me that prior to this episode, he had not been diagnosed by his doctors with sinusitis.
Now, as far as sinusitis, would you just tell us generally what that is for the benefit of the people who are not physicians?
Well, there is obviously many different types of sinusitis. You can have blockage of the sinus cavity's drainage hole from swelling, whether it's from a cold or upper respiratory infection or allergy. The sinus is blocked, contents get trapped inside the sinus, and pressure can go up, causing a headache. There may or may not be infections associated with that.
Is there a classic clinical presentation that you, as an ENT, look at for when you're trying to evaluate a patient for sinusitis?
There is no one classic presentation.
Are there symptoms that are commonly seen in sinusitis?
There are a number of symptoms that can be seen.
All right. Well, what about nasal discharge? Do you typically see that with sinusitis?
You can in acute sinusitis. In chronic sinusitis, you very possibly won't.
Did Joe Johnson have acute or chronic sinusitis, in your opinion, if you have one?
Well, Joe was acutely ill at the time, so it would be an acute process.
So can we agree for the purposes of this discussion, we're dealing with acute sinusitis?
Most likely, yes.
Would you expect then that in evaluating a patient for acute sinusitis, that more likely than not, you're going to find nasal discharge?
You may or may not. You can easily have blockage of a sinus without having visible drainage, which when I examined him in that time with a telescope to get that initial culture, there was no active pus in his nose.
Okay, this will be some more two-voice practice at about 1:30 for the record. Your name is Steve Reynolds.
That's correct.
And Steve, do you live in Georgetown?
Yes, sir.
And where do you work?
I work at Parker Munn Ford.
And what is your position at Parker Munn Ford?
The assistant service manager.
Assistant service manager.
Yes, sir.
And how long have you been assistant service manager?
Just a short amount of time.
And how long have you been with Parker Munn Ford?
I came with Parker Munn Ford in June of '73.
How long have you done this type of work?
I've done this type of work since 1963.
And what does your job entail? I mean, what do you do as part of your job?
Service and body shop manager.
Do you make estimates or appraisals of wrecked cars, damaged cars as part of your work?
Yes, sir, I do.
Do you know the Ranchero that was sold by Parker Munn Ford, then Port City Ford, to Mr. Sox?
Yes, sir.
Did you go to the scene of the accident upon being called by Mr. Sox?
Yes, sir, I did. My body shop man that runs the wrecker, he went first, and then he called me to come assist him at the scene of the accident.
Did you inspect the car and also the trailer at that time?
No, sir. We removed it from the road site, and it was inspected at Port City Ford at the time.
Did you inspect it at that time?
Yes, sir. We looked at it. Yes, sir.
Could you tell us positively whether or not it was a total loss?
Yes, sir. Definitely.
Both or one?
Both the truck or car or whatever you call it, and the trailer was, the damage exceeded the value of the unit.
And you determined that both were a total loss?
Yes, sir. Both were a total loss.
Did you check the trailer hitch itself?
Yes, sir. Mr. Sox tried to find out why. He requested us to look at it, which we did.
Did you look at the trailer hitch yourself?
Yes, sir. We did.
Could you determine where, if anything, a breakage occurred in the trailer hitch?
There was a breakage there at that time. Well, we did look at it. Yes, sir.
And where was that break?
It's been too long without looking at it and seeing, it's just been too long.
Can you look at this thing right here and tell us whether or not that is what you saw at the time?
No, sir. I can't say whether that is the exact one. It has the same similarities of the one that was on the vehicle.
Did you see the trailer hitch prior to the time that it was wrecked?
Yes, sir.
And you say you saw it after the wreck?
Yes, sir.
All right, sir.
It was a tubing or pipe type effect. There was one pipe that went over the top of the other one. And there was a weld broke at, I guess you'd call it the seam or the joint, whatever the case may be.
Your testimony is that where the breakage occurred is where it was welded, wherever that place happened to be?
Yes, sir. There was a weld that was broken. Yes, sir.
Does this trailer hitch resemble the one that you saw?
Yes, sir, it does.
But you say it has been 3 years and you can't remember?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Exactly.
Yes, sir.
As a part of your job, Mr. Reynolds, have you welded yourself? Do you weld?
Yes, sir.
Could you testify as to whether or not there was a defect in this weld?
No, sir. I'm strictly the amateur welder.
Do you have a welder in your place who does it professionally every day?
No, sir, we don't.
What about Mr. Cusack?
Strictly amateur welder.
Let me ask you this. This pipe that runs from the back to the front bar, I believe there were 4 places that were welded underneath this car.
Yes, sir.
4 places, these 2, and there were 2 more, as I understand it out here.
Right.
Was the pipe broken at any place other than where it was welded?
Do you mean was it ripped or anything of that nature?
Was the pipe itself just broken in half, or was it broken where it was welded?
There was a broken weld on it. I didn't see any other breaks where there were any welds.
You said that you had a basic knowledge of welding.
Yes, sir.
So you are familiar with the term male and female parts?
No, sir.
Have you seen where you slide a piece over it and hold 2 other pieces in place?
Sir?
Have you ever seen welding where you slide a piece over it and hold 2 other pieces in place?
No, sir. Like I said, I'm strictly amateur.
I think you testified that you did see the trailer hitch before the wreck.
No, sir, I did not.
You did not see the trailer hitch before it was wrecked?
No, sir. No, sir.
You only saw it after the wreck?
Yes, sir.
All right. And you don't see the 3 parts of the trailer hitch after the wreck that Mr. Sox testified to?
We brought everything to the Ford place. All the parts were there. Yes, sir.
Did you bring a little piece of round tubing somewhat similar to that?
Everything was still attached to the vehicle.
Everything, the entire trailer hitch was still attached to the vehicle?
Everything was with the vehicle. It was underneath the car. Yes, sir.
But this part had broken off and was with the...
Yes, sir. It was separated under the car.
And you don't remember picking up any other parts, a very small part?
There was a bunch of loose parts at the scene of the accident. We put most all of them inside the vehicle.